I'm hearing buzzing going on. Okay, it is 2 o'clock and we're going to start. So I want to welcome everybody to CadreTalk. And my name is Dawn Penfold, and I'm president of Meeting Jobs, which recently partnered with Cadre. I want to first tell you a little bit about CadreTalk. We've developed this series as an opportunity for you to grab a cup of coffee and take a short break out of your day. Mark your calendar for every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, where we'll have a 30-minute conversation with an industry expert on a variety of topics. Next week, Todd Toronto will be talking with Elizabeth Sage, Associate Director of Events and Trade Shows at Illumina. The topic will be getting a seat at that important table. Our goal at Cadre and Meeting Jobs is to give all the meeting and event professionals an opportunity to learn something new in this conversation, even if it's just one takeaway. So before we get started, let me share a bit about who we are. Cadre is a very cool platform and a service offering a compliant, and the key word here is compliant, gig economy, freelancer staffing model. I want you to think about a platform for event staff and independent contractors like Uber or LinkedIn with a marketing opportunity like Google. Bottom line, if you're hiring an event staff, virtual event staff, or a longer-term meeting or event project professional, Cadre is your source for finding that talent that's affordable and compliant. If you're a gig worker in our industry, this is your go-to place to find work. Meeting Jobs offers an industry-specific job board as well as services in retained search and resume pre-qualification services for the events and meetings industry. Together, Cadre and Meeting Jobs provides a full complement of labor resources across the hiring spectrum, from full-time to project-based contract planners to event staff. And you can visit us at hirecadre.com or meetingjobs.com. So a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is muted and you're not seen, so there's no need to throw on extra makeup or make sure that you're presentable from the waist up. You're encouraged to ask questions using the Q&A area, and we'll address your questions at the end of the program. So today, I'm really proud to say that we have Loren Edelstein. And Loren oversees the editorial content for Northstar Meetings Group's industry-leading brands. We all know them: Meetings Convention, Successful Meetings, Incentive, and Meeting News. Across NMG's many platforms, including print, digital, and face-to-face events. She joined M&C in 1993, you must have been a child, after spending 6 years at Corporate Travel Magazine. Loren is a frequent speaker at industry gatherings, including Northstar's own events and major conferences produced by MPI, GBTA, and other associations. She holds a BA in English and journalism from University of Albany. And a native New Yorker, Loren migrated across the Hudson River in 1994 to be closer to Northstar's New Jersey headquarters. So welcome, Loren. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
You've been a fixture with Northstar for many years. I mean, I've known you as long as I've been in the industry with Northstar. I want to first start, and I know this wasn't one of the questions that we talked about before, but what path did you walk to get here? And why did you choose this line of journalism? You studied it in college, but why did you choose this line of journalism? And are the skills different from a niche journalism activity like this to a more traditional role that like we may see with the Washington Post or the New York Times?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wanted to be in magazine journalism, and that was my focus, and I wanted to be in Manhattan. And it just so happened that I interviewed at a company that had all business magazines. It was Gralla Publications, and they had 33 at the time, business to business magazines, you know, serving certain industries, National Jeweler, kitchen and bath business, you know, those kind of magazines. And one of them was Corporate Travel Magazine. And one of them was actually Incentive, was Gralla as well. So they brought in young people who bopped around to the different magazines. And once I saw that there were two travel industry publications, one was Corporate Travel, one was Meeting News. It was a monthly magazine at the time. I was like, I want to be on one of those magazines. And so I did get hired onto Corporate Travel. You know,
and you didn't know anything about our industry at all.
I knew nothing about it, but I feel like it was so fortunate because it's very different to be working in an industry versus consumer or, broad news, because you become part of that business, so I'm going to say 34 years, something like that.
You were a child.
I mean, I feel like I am part of the meetings and business travel industry. And, it's my professional life. It's partly my social life, which happens after time. And I really like that because you first of all, it's not boring. It changes all the time. I've learned constantly throughout my career and what I do. And because media itself has changed and broadened, and we have so many different ways of providing content, it's always fresh.
Well,
it's always
that's what I want to ask, because it's hard to pinpoint, I'm going to ask you, it's hard to pinpoint one thing, but you've been a journalist in our industry for so many years. What do you think are the most significant changes you've seen in reporting our industry?
So, I mean, as a journalist, so much is digital now. When something happens, and we're not waiting for the next monthly magazine to put out an article about it. I mean, news wasn't news then, even though we would have news coverage. Now, now news happens and immediately we're tweeting about it while writing about it. And, within a couple hours, it's posted on our website. Yep. So the immediacy of news has really changed the way we do things. I mean, we didn't have to stay up to the minute on every development that would affect our audience.
No, it was more like information.
Right. It was more feature style analysis. I remember writing features about, who gets tipped and how much for a meeting, things like that were important, or how to structure the guest program and, and meatier things like negotiation strategies and all that. But now, we still do all that because we're still producing a magazine, and we're doing everything else in between, daily breaking news. Meeting News is our daily e-newsletter. We have events, and we plan the content for the events. We do webinars like this. We do podcasts. So there are so many avenues for us to get news and information out to our industry, and to make those connections, and to bring the world of buyers and suppliers together within all the Northstar products.
Yeah, probably one of the most difficult decisions is to analyze which is the best communication tool for getting out a certain subject matter.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what it is. I'm really liking doing recorded interviews, whether that's video or just audio. If I'm interviewing somebody, I'll usually now do it on Zoom and record it with video, because sometimes it's the best way to get the information out, is just to let people into your conversation, or take a piece of it, and write an article and insert a piece, because people like to click on a video if it's not too long. They like to listen, especially people are driving again. They, like to listen to podcasts while they're driving. So we just try to provide content in any way that you want to consume it. So you get to choose how you consume it, what you consume, and we're just, going everywhere, everywhere that news is now, in every platform.
So with that said, and I know this is probably now, I'm going to say this is one of those questions that you're going like, really, Dawn, but the industry was at a standstill in 2020. I mean, everything stopped. And since you cover Northstar, the meetings group covers the meetings industry and hosts live events, am I to assume it was a slow year for you, or was it one of those years that you were like, oh my God, how are we going to keep up with this?
This was probably the busiest year in my career. It was such a crisis for the meetings industry, and they needed our, audience needed information. Suppliers and buyers needed to know what's happening with meetings. Will meetings ever come back? what are the state restrictions on meeting size? Do people have to wear masks? Are tests available, for my constituents? So there was all that information that needed to be found and disseminated. So one of the first things we started by keeping a list of canceled and postponed events and events that were going forward, because the first decision was, do we meet? So that was kind of a starting point. But then as different states rolled out different regulations and restrictions, we started ongoing roundup of restrictions and any kind of regulations regarding group gatherings by state, and a separate list by country, which we're still doing. So we're going on 14 months of 15 months of doing those same stories that we keep refreshing. And we've heard people say, the head of the Las Vegas CVBs, I start every day looking at what the other states are doing, because I want to know, comparison wise. So that's important. And it's important as people make decisions. And then it was, what do we do about our events? And it's funny because in January, we had an event in New York City. And I remember opening remarks saying, let's not worry about this flu. We've had a flu before. We're the meetings industry. We're still going to meet. And everyone was cheering and everyone was happy to hear that. And then early March, we had a meeting in California. And by then we were not shaking hands. We weren't even wearing masks yet. We were realizing this was an issue. And we started to get to the point where, is it the right thing to forge ahead and have meetings for the sake of the meetings industry to set this, precedent that we can still meet? Or where does it become irresponsible? And that's around where it became irresponsible. Yeah. And we had already committed to bringing, our buyers and suppliers together at a number of events. And what we had to do very, very quickly is learn how to plan virtual events and restructure those events that we were having. And in some cases, we changed the dates and, maybe changed the education depending on what was planned. We found that speakers were very happy to participate in a virtual event. They didn't have to travel somewhere. It was, an hour of their time versus 2 or 3 days of their time. But the meeting planning staff was really, really amazing. They were right on top of that. And, one of the things we were doing right away was participating in demos of all these virtual meeting platforms, which at first all looked the same. And you start realizing how different they are. And then we became very good at that, to the point where other organizations were saying, how do you do that? Can you tell us how you do that? And we started providing that service, to clients. We started, behind the scenes planning other entities' virtual meetings. So we just did so many things that were new and different, and kept us in front of the audience and kept people coming to us for information that they were looking for. So we were busy.
Yeah, and you're very busy. Usually we do questions and answers at the end, but these are two that kind of are dealing with this topic. One question that came through was, what sort of content resonates best with a meetings and events audience? Have you found what content?
Yeah. So for the meetings and events industry, they want information that is directly relevant to their jobs and helps them do their jobs better. So they don't want the motivational speaker, the rah-rah. They don't want coping with change. They want something more like, what are vaccine passports? And is that something that will become a reality for meetings going forward, and when? We just had a session on that at our independent planner education conference. And that's the kind of session. And we also had Jonathan Howe, an industry attorney.
John has been our guest twice.
I know, he's amazing. He's always amazing. And actually we had almost nothing that was prepared needed to be brought forward. I had a whole lot of questions I could have asked him, but the audience is coming to microphones and they're asking their questions, which is really the idea of it. Get your questions answered. What do you need to know right now? And that's really what resonates, because we're at a time where the strong will survive.
Yeah.
I mean, we're expecting a bit of compression, and the people who are really up on what needs to be done right now to serve, the industry responsibly, safely, to stand out from the competition. That's what people want to know right now.
Another question came through with, how do you decide when content is news and when it's really a promotion?
Oh,
Ooh.
well, after X many years, it's kind of obvious to me. We don't write about things like, X hotel or X hotel company is offering 25% off of food and beverage if you book before December 31st. We don't, write about things like that. I mean, we're reporters, and it's pretty clear what is, we're very unlikely to report on something, from a single property. I get emails all the time, this property has a new GM. I can give you the headshot. I think it's a great cover story, and then I have to explain that that's not a cover story for our industry. So really the litmus test is it information that meeting planners or meeting suppliers really need to know or want to know?
Okay. While we're speaking, you just came out with a pulse survey, and you started your pulse survey, well, a year and a half ago, I think it was. Wasn't
March 2020, we started it. Mm-hmm.
And it was pure genius, because what you have done, and correct me if I'm wrong, every month or so you've taken another pulse and have been able to chronicle the changes in our industry. Mm-hmm. And so can you synopsize the trends that you've seen since the beginning to the latest pulse survey? Yeah. Like, what extent are in-person meetings happening? Yeah. And what COVID precautions are being taken? What people are thinking, what's keeping them up at night?
So much. Meetings are happening. 81% in our last 2 surveys said they're going to hold their next in-person event this year. And most of it is third quarter, fourth quarter, but some are happening now. Early on, the focus was canceling, postponing, rescheduling. That was the, job one of meeting planners. They were working on what to do about their meetings that they needed to cancel, postpone, rebook, all that. And that was when we asked, what is your primary job responsibility right now? And we're seeing a shift. We've seen a steady shift. Now, 19% say their primary focus is to source and book live or hybrid meeting. And by hybrid meeting, we mean there's a live component and also an online component to the meeting. So they're still going to a place, X number of people who are going to participate in person. And those who don't wish to travel have another opportunity to participate, at least in part, online. So 19% are actively, more than any other purpose to their job, is sourcing and booking in-person events. But, a little more than that, 23% are still focused on rescheduling and rebooking. And we see that the same meetings have been rescheduled, rebooked, and for a lot of meeting professionals, honestly, especially the independents who aren't structured to work based on time spent or management fees, they've spent a lot of time rebooking, canceling, rescheduling, and not getting paid. So this has been a really, really difficult year. Yeah.
Are you seeing more of a trend with the type of meetings, a corporate versus association versus medical third party incentive?
Yeah. I mean, stuff like pharma meetings have been happening because that's very important right now. There's a little more caution on the corporate side. There's a higher level of concern about liability. That's something that's still being worked out. I'm just writing an article about, whether a liability waiver does anything. And, that really depends on a lot of different factors. I mean, you can ask somebody to assume responsibility for the risk of getting sick from being at your meeting, but you still have a duty of care. And there's a lot of other factors that come into play, including different state by state laws about that. But I digress. And the other thing that we're seeing is how the precautions people are taking. For our meetings, we're being, some would say, overly cautious, more as a way to demonstrate all the measures that could be put in place for a meeting. So right now, and this is likely to change as more people are vaccinated, but right now we're requiring proof of vaccination through a secure medical platform provider that we're working with. Proof of vaccination, full vaccination, more than 2 weeks before the start of the meeting, a negative COVID test within 72 hours of the start of the meeting, one or the other, in order to participate. And then, signing a waiver saying that you promise 5 things. Every single day, we ask people to promise they're not going to hug, kiss, handshake, that they're going to avoid physical contact, that they'll wear their masks at all indoor events or within the hotel, within the venue, over their mouth and nose. We specify that. No chin diapers, as my boss calls them. Mm-hmm. What else do we ask? They wear a tracking device, which some people do not like. It only tracks within our meeting space, not when you're in your hotel room, or maybe you're not in your hotel room, you're in someone else's hotel room. We're not tracking that. When you're in the meeting space, it's who is in proximity of each other. So if somebody does become sick, we're able to tell through this technology who you were in close contact with and within what amount of time. So we're implementing that. So now when we're asking in the pulse survey, what measures do you expect to institute for your next in-person event? We're seeing fewer planners expect to require masks. And my guess, educated guess, is that because those meetings are taking place later in the year, they're hoping / expecting that masks won't be necessary, because there was, earlier on, it was pretty clear. I mean, it was state regulation pretty consistently that indoors you were going to be wearing masks. And now different states are, waiving those rules, which is another thing. I'm looking at the time. I could talk forever. Is that
I know we've got 2 other articles to get to.
Okay, but just one more thing on the mask thing, because this is a question that people have been asking. If a state, Florida, Texas, any other state, says they're not going to require masks indoors, the venue still can. So the hotel can, the convention center can, and a lot of them are.
And they have to adhere to those rules.
Right. So it's not, even if it's not mandated, you can say that for your event, you will require it.
Okay.
But go on, Dawn.
Well, I would like to get to because it's more of kind of my industry too, but there was a recent article that you published about remote workers.
Yes.
And you quoted the surveys from Flex Jobs.
Yes.
And I was like stunned when I saw the results where 50% of employees would absolutely look for a new job if they were required to go back to the office full time.
Yeah. And that was amazing. I'm just looking for the
numbers. And 2% of all that worked from home to work at, they wanted to, only 2% said that they wanted to work from home. Wait, what was the 2%?
Or fully in the office.
Fully in the office. Only 2% wanted to work in the office.
Right.
Our industry was like being a dog being dragged through mud with allowing remote workers and work from home.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing the trend change?
Yeah. Nobody wants to go back. I mean, what this has proven, what this experience has proven largely, to probably most companies might ask, is that it really doesn't matter where your computer is, where you're sitting. I mean, I've had a full-time senior editor based in Guadalajara, for years, and nobody knew. We had a 718, which is Brooklyn phone number through Vonage. Nobody would know, and it really didn't matter. I feel like I am in closer contact with my staff than I ever was, because we have a daily morning Zoom meeting, and it could be 15, 20 minutes, just what's everyone working on? What should we know? What needs to get done. And I feel like we didn't have that because we were all in the same office. Most of us were in the same office, and we didn't have that daily catch up, which has become so great. And, we're on Slack, office, internal group chatting platform all the time. And I feel like it's more like minute to minute. We know what each other is doing now. And we had an office in Manhattan that we ended up closing, and to great savings as well. It was an office near Penn Station in Manhattan.
I know I'm seeing the change with hiring practices, that people are now allowing it. And then on our end, what that's going to do is that traditionally people want to hire in their backyard.
Yeah.
And now if there's remote working available, all of a sudden the competition is going to become more fierce, because somebody in Chicago could apply for a job in New York. Absolutely. And it's going to change our industry. But I think people in the long run will be able to find more, I would say, the talent that they're actually looking for that fits the position.
Yeah, I think so. We're hiring, an editorial position. And I first said, Secaucus-based preferred. And then I kind of took that off, because I said, it really doesn't matter. We had somebody in Florida apply. I'm like, we really could use somebody in that part of the country. We do a lot of coverage of Florida destinations. So it really does open up the possibilities and the opportunity for you to really find the kind of expertise. And another benefit is it allows us to really pay attention to the diversity of our workforce, because, we can just kind of go, maybe we're in a community that isn't very diverse, but now kind of the world is open to us in terms of hiring.
I think it's going to be a much more inclusive workforce.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, we've got 3 minutes for the last article. I know, I told you this is the quickest half hour.
Yeah.
And I want to hone in on the article that you just published on destinations and site selection.
Yes.
And, what is different? Is there anything different now when choosing a meeting destination? And I mean, we're seeing a lot of civil unrest over the past year. Has that affected the appeal of certain destinations?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep. So a couple of factors. The purpose of the survey initially was to ask how COVID has affected your site selection priorities. And it strongly has, 80%, 81% said their priorities have changed as a result of COVID, and that, they have other things that they're looking for when they selected a destination. One of them being that it's nice to be outside. I mean, climate is more important now because people want to have outdoor events to the extent that they can, outdoor meal functions, or, try to get people outside. Cost is still the biggest logistical concern, but civil unrest, we had 81%, about split, like 42 to 40%, definitely or possibly would avoid sites of recent civil unrest. And we had 9% said that they would avoid meeting in state capitals. I mean, post, around January 6th and around that time, there were threats against state capitals. This was conducted in March, though. So that was, a carryover concern.
Yeah.
9% said they wouldn't meet in state capitals, and another 30% said that they might avoid those destinations. And political leanings are even a factor for 1/3 of people. 1/3 want to avoid a city that's far right, and 1/3 want to avoid a city that's far left. So, people are really paying attention to a lot of different things that might not have been on their radar before in terms of making decisions.
Okay, well, we're going to end. I always ask the people who've joined us to get out their crystal ball and to give us an idea of what do you think is going to be, and again, we can say what's going to happen next week or what's going to happen the next year, but if you had to do any sort of trend citing, what do you think it would be?
I mean, I do expect vaccine passports, so-called vaccine passports, to be, a norm and to have a role in the meetings industry. And I do expect hybrid events to be preferred, as people will be hesitant to travel for any number of reasons, including budgetary. I mean, a lot of people have had a really difficult year, people and organizations, and might not want to spend the money to travel, especially if they can participate virtually. So I think that people, meeting planners who don't know how to work in a virtual element to their event need to should gain that expertise for their own career development.
Okay, great. Loren, thank you. You have been a source of information and a leader in journalism in our industry for years, and I want to thank you. And we're very proud to have you here. And Northstar has also been, it's always been one of my go-to places when I need to find information, and we want to say thank you for doing this and continued support, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Great. And back at you, Dawn, because we've always relied on you for, the employment information that our audience needs to know. So we appreciate that as well.
It's a nice relationship. So thank you. Okay. Take care, Loren. Be well. Bye, everyone.